YouTube and hello Twitter. Welcome to Thursdays with Viola. Today I'm going to be talking about movies, my favorite movies. The movies that I absolutely loved as a younger person and that I obsessed over and wanted to watch over and over and over again. What is going to become apparent about this little list of films is that I was definitely a child of the 80s. Literally, I was born in 1980, so I was a kid in the 80s. So most of these films, they're from mid-80s to early 90s. There's a couple from there. Let's get started. What I will say is that I'd love to say that, I was this big bookworm. I was always squirreled away with a book somewhere. That's not true. I was all over the place as a little girl. It took a lot to get me to sit still and listen or watch and enjoy a story. I was mostly wanting to play dress up and make believe and climb trees and swim and go for walks and play with my dolls and all that sort of stuff. But to this day, I like big movies that involve hopefully paranormal, magical, light horror, historical elements, that sort of thing. And I have to say that I'm really at a point in my film watching life where I'm ready for some new recommendations. They don't have to be contemporary. I feel like there's a lot I missed out on from the 80s and 90s as well, and 2000s, the early part of which I don't remember very well. But much like I found great books via Twitter, perhaps after listening to me talk about some of my favorite films, you guys will have recommendations for me, and I would love to hear them. So first, we're going to talk about Goonies, 1985, directed by Richard Donner, and it's really a quintessential 80s kids classic. This is the first film that I clearly remember being enchanted by. It has the mystery of other eras in history, from like the centuries-old pirate who's called One-Eyed Willie. I'm so sorry, I'm immature. To there's like an explorer called Chester Copperpot. He's from many decades before the time of the Goonies kids. There's old maps, there's a really vintage baseball card, there's Spanish gold, and there's Cyndi Lauper songs. And it's kids against adults. It's the little man and small communities against big evil corporations. So it's a great film, coming of age, friendship, and it's that last bit of innocence, albeit very potty mouth innocence, very cheeky innocence, but I think it still is innocence before those harsher, older teen years come along, and I loved it. Then a film I think I saw slightly after it actually came out would be Splash, directed by Ron Howard, which was released in 1984. And many a young lady of the 80s wanted to be Madison the Mermaid, as played by Daryl Hannah. I certainly wanted to be Daryl Hannah as a very young lady. However, I was not destined to be a tall, blonde, successful Hollywood actress, but I didn't realize this in like 1984. Tom Hanks's character, Alan, is just adorable, and we've even got the late, great John Candy, who plays Alan's brother, Freddie. It's a wonderful twist on The Little Mermaid. It starts as this childhood encounter on a cruise ship where Alan falls into the sea and Madison saves him. It's that first experience of chemistry with someone special. And fate decides to be really lovely and bring them together as adults, but they're up against it, obviously. Madison she's so innocent, she's so beautiful, but she's also her own person, but she's from this totally different world to Alan's world. And she likes Alan's world because it has pizza and television and shopping. His world also has exploitive assholes who don't understand anything different. And obviously Madison has her little secret that she's a mermaid. And there's this bit where after they've really kind of gotten together and she's at his place, she locks herself away in his bathroom to give herself like a salt bath so that she can stretch out her glorious, beautiful mermaid tail. And he knocks on the door and she acts a little weird because she doesn't want him to see her tail or know she's a mermaid yet. And he eventually barges in because he's worried about her. It's a favorite scene of mine. I don't really know why, but it's a great movie. I watched it obsessively as a child. I wanted to know about mermaids. It made me want to believe that they're real and that one day I could be one. It still hasn't happened, but I'm holding on to that hope. Anyway, next film is Peggy Sue Got Married, directed by none other than Francis Ford Coppola, 1986. And as a little girl, I liked music from the 50s and 60s. I wasn't really embracing what the big kids with the big hair were into just then. I kind of thought they were weird. I mean, I love 80s music now. I'm it's great now. I love that decade. It's pretty, it certainly holds its own as far as music is concerned, but at the time I was having my own little childhood rebellion and like, no, 50s and 60s music is better or whatever. But anyway, Kathleen Turner plays Peggy Sue, and her husband, Charlie, who's played by Nicolas Cage, are quite estranged on the eve of their high school reunion. You know, their marriage is in tatters, things aren't looking well for them, but they were high school sweethearts once upon a time. Anyway, at the party, at the reunion, Peggy passes out, and she wakes up, and it actually is, she's in high school in 1959. Sorry, that's my dog doing his best to be disruptive. She literally wakes up during her senior year in high school. She goes back to her past. And I rewatched this film recently. I found it very emotional as an adult, the idea of going back in time to actually see what was your teenage life, your younger life, to see your parents young again. It was kind of a bit tear-jerky for me, to be honest. And when it comes to movies, I cry very easily, so I'm not into purposefully watching sad movies because it just doesn't take much for me to lose it. But it's still a great film. The late 50s music and seeing Nicolas Cage and a younger Jim Carrey pretend to be high school students in a doo-wop group is pretty entertaining. I liked that was good. And also there's the conversations between Peggy Sue, who is like the popular girl, and the high school nerd who's the only one she can talk to about what might possibly be happening to her. I was Peggy Sue for Halloween one year. As it happens, my mother made me a poodle skirt. And I that's what I told everyone. I said, no, I'm not just a 50s girl, I'm Peggy Sue. Anyway, it made me love the notion of visiting the 50s and what it was like to be a teen or a young person back then versus being a teen and a young person in my era. It's kind of a silly movie, but it made me think beyond the boundaries of the story, and I wanted time travel to be real. Next movie I'm going to briefly mention is Beetlejuice, 1988, Tim Burton. I'm not going to go on about it too much because I think it's pretty popular amongst you tweeples. So let's just leave it there. It's a must-watch for the season. That's my dog having a drink of water. He's really determined to be involved in this. He's very supportive. Also, Winona Ryder is who I wanted to be as a teenager. Daryl Hannah was kind of my idol as a very young lady. And then it was Winona Ryder. And I would watch it over and over and over because it just struck me as the perfect movie. You know, the living and the dead somehow trying to coexist is kind of a fun theme. And then we're into the early 90s. So the next film, which I have to mention, is Bram Stoker's Dracula, 1992, Francis Ford Coppola. And I have spoken about this before, and it's definitely going to be like against my religion if I don't watch it at some point in the next few weeks. It's visually stunning. It's atmospheric. It's a little bit saucy. It's a little graphic in bits, but it stays in that realm of just asking you to temporarily suspend your disbelief. It draws you into that world. It cemented my love of vampires, which I had before, to be honest. The history of the region where Dracula comes from, the settings, the mythology of vampires, and the deep, obsessive, binding love between Mina and Dracula just really spoke to me at the time because I was 12. Next and last of the Mohicans, 1992, also directed by Michael Mann. And again, this pulled me into the past. It made the history books, what can get a tad stale and not very engaging, it made them come to life. It's set in what is today upstate New York. It's loosely based on the book by James Fenimore Cooper, set around 1757 during the French and Indian War. It's basically Britain and France kind of pushing for colonial position in the Americas, using whatever local tribes they can to their advantage. It's brutal, it's tragic, but in the midst of all of it is love. You've got Cora and Nathaniel, or Hawkeye, managing to express their feelings for each other amidst this war between the colonial powers, and there's grudges between American indigenous tribes, and obviously there's the exploitation of these people by said colonial powers. At the time, I found it, and I still find it, just sweepingly epic and romantic. So there's more, but I'm trying to keep these videos shorter. But those are a few of my favorites from when I was a girl and very easily influenced and pulled in by movies. I realize these are all a bit mainstream. They're not diverse enough, frankly. But if you have any films of a similar nature, or films that you were obsessed with that you wanted to watch over and over and over as a younger person, whatever era that may be, then please share them. Please comment and share on Twitter as well underneath my post, which I will obviously be putting up under my hashtag Thursdays with Viola post. Please mention what films you would recommend. Particularly, just films that maybe you really like to revisit from time to time, or that you fancy revisiting. Because I find that when the season changes, you kind of think, oh yeah, it's time to watch something a bit different, or revisit that film that I haven't watched for years, or discover something new. So anyway, that's it. I will cut myself off now. So have a lovely rest of your Thursday. Have a pleasant Friday. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you guys next week. See ya.